Welcome to the lecture on development. Today we are going to look at what is known as developmental psychology, and this is a branch of psychology that examines how people are continually developing from infancy through old age, both physically, cognitively, and socially. So there are three major issues in psychology that research kind of centers on and that psychologists debate about. The first is the argument of nature versus nurture. So what shapes our development? Is it our genetic inheritance or is it our experience in our environment? And the second point of contention is a question about whether or not development is a gradual and continuous process, or if it exists in very separate delineated stages. And so this argument is referred to as continuity, which is a gradual, slow process where one developmental phenomenon builds on top of the next, and then stages is where you go through life and you experience your life in very separate phases. And then the next issue that's debated frequently in developmental psychology is stability versus change. And this relates to our personality. Is our personality stable over time, or can a zebra change its stripes? Can people change their personalities? So these questions are questions that come up a lot throughout the lecture, and not all psychologists agree on the answers to these questions, so you certainly don't have to agree either, but you can kind of take part in the debate between these three major issues. So the first age range that we're going to look at is infancy and childhood. And so infancy obviously starts with conception. And some interesting facts about the process of conception is that when a male ejaculates, 200 million sperm are released, and only one of them will reach the egg of the woman. And so the egg of a woman is called the ovum, and it's approximately 85,000 times the size of a sperm. So it's very large compared to the sperm. And a female egg in a mammal is the same size regardless of the mammal. So a human egg is the same size as an elephant egg, for example. And so the one sperm that hits the egg and begins the process of fertilization is you. So you already kind of won a race against 200 million other sperm. So let's go ahead and watch a video on conception.
Fertilization is the epic story of a single sperm facing incredible odds to unite with an egg and form a new human life. It is the story of all of us. During sexual intercourse, about 300 million sperm enter the vagina. Soon afterward, millions of them will either flow out of the vagina or die in its acidic environment. However, many survive because of the protective elements provided in the fluid surrounding them. Next, the sperm must pass through the cervix, an opening into the uterus. Usually, it remains tightly closed, but here the cervix is open for a few days while the woman ovulates. The sperm swim through the cervical mucus, which is thinned to a more watery consistency for easier passage. Once inside the cervix, the sperm continues swimming toward the uterus, though millions will die trying to make it through the mucus. Some sperm remain behind, caught in the folds of the cervix, but they may later continue the journey as a backup to the first group. Inside the uterus, muscular uterine contractions assist the sperm on their journey toward the egg. However, resident cells from the woman's immune system, mistaking the sperm for foreign invaders, destroy thousands more. Next, half the sperm head for the empty fallopian tube, while the other half swim toward the tube containing the unfertilized egg. Now, only a few thousand remain. Inside the fallopian tube, tiny cilia push the egg toward the uterus. To continue, the sperm must surge against this motion to reach the egg. Some sperm get trapped in the cilia and die. During this part of the journey, chemicals in the reproductive tract cause the membranes covering the heads of the sperm to change. As a result, the sperm become hyperactive, swimming harder and faster toward their destination. At long last, the sperm reach the egg. Only a few dozen of the original 300 million sperm remain. The egg is covered with a layer of cells called the corona radiata. The sperm must push through this layer to reach the outer layer of the egg, the zona pellucida. When sperm reach the zona pellucida, they attach to specialized sperm receptors on the surface, which triggers their acrosomes to release digestive enzymes, enabling the sperm to burrow into the layer. Inside the zona pellucida is a narrow, fluid-filled space just outside the egg cell membrane. The first sperm to make contact will fertilize the egg. After a perilous journey and against incredible odds, a single sperm attaches to the egg cell membrane. Within a few minutes, their outer membranes fuse and the egg pulls the sperm inside. This event causes changes in the egg membrane that prevent other sperm from attaching to it. Next, the egg releases chemicals that push other sperm away from the egg and create an impenetrable fertilization membrane. As the reaction spreads outward, the zona pellucida hardens, trapping any sperm unlucky enough to be caught inside. Outside the egg, sperm are no longer able to attach to the zona pellucida. Meanwhile, inside the egg, the tightly packed male genetic material spreads out. A new membrane forms around the genetic material, creating the male pronucleus. Inside, the genetic material reforms into 23 chromosomes. The female genetic material, awakened by the fusion of the sperm with the egg, finishes dividing, resulting in the female pronucleus, which also contains 23 chromosomes. As the male and female pronuclei form, spiderweb-like threads, called microtubules, pull them toward each other. The two sets of chromosomes join together, completing the process of fertilization. At this moment, a unique genetic code arises, instantly determining gender, hair color, eye color, and hundreds of other characteristics. This new single cell, the zygote, is the beginning of a new human being. And now the cilia in the fallopian tube gently sweep the zygote toward the uterus, where he or she will implant in the rich uterine lining, growing and maturing for the next 9 months until ready for birth.
So another interesting phenomenon that can happen during conception is the phenomenon of twins. So there are two types of twins, which is monozygotic and dizygotic. So monozygotic is referred to as identical twins, and this is when one egg becomes fertilized and splits, and then you get two babies that look almost identical. And then there's dizygotic or fraternal twins, which is when a mother releases two eggs and both become fertilized by two separate sperm, and this is when you have dizygotic twins. So it is possible, and it has happened, that a woman has released two eggs and then had sex with two different men, and so both of those eggs become fertilized by different men. So it is possible to have fraternal or dizygotic twins with different fathers. So a newborn child is also referred to as a neonate. And one of the things that we look for in neonates is the ability to perform certain reflexes. And reflexes are defined as unlearned involuntary responses that occur automatically in the presence of certain stimuli. So the different reflexes that we look for are called the rooting reflex, which is when you rub your finger on the side of a baby's cheek and they turn their head towards your finger, and this will allow them to be able to find food. The next one is the sucking reflex, which involves breathing and swallowing and tonguing. And this is a reflex that prompts infants to suck at things that touch their lips, which also helps them to feed. And then infants have what is known as the gag reflex, which allows them to clear the throat and can prevent them from choking. The startle reflex is when a baby is startled, they fling their arms, fan their fingers, and arch their back in response to a noise. But they also have this startle reflex when they are very young because they're used to being kind of balled up in the womb, and then when they are sleeping, they often feel scared because they feel like they're falling when they're outside the womb because they have so much space. And so this is one of the reasons that mothers and fathers will swaddle their babies to prevent them from doing the startle reflex and waking themselves up. And then the next reflex is the Babinski reflex, and this is spelled Babinski. And if you take a baby's foot and you rub the outer sole, their toes will fan out. There's also what's known as the stepping reflex. So if you hold a baby under their armpits just above the ground, they'll kind of move their feet in a walking motion. And of course, this later does turn into walking. So these reflexes are replaced with more complex behaviors when the babies get older. At 3 months, babies generally roll over. 6 months is when they usually start sitting up. 11 months is when they usually start standing. And then around 1 year is when they start walking. But the timing can really vary from baby to baby. This is just the average timing that we see. So an interesting fact about identical twins is that they typically begin sitting up and walking on nearly the same day. Even if they've actually been adopted into different homes, they still tend to start working almost at the exact same time, which indicates that there might be some genetic component to when we develop these physical motor skills. And this is true for other physical skills as well, including bowel movements and bladder control. So some parents will choose to punish their child if they're not able to potty train at the time the parent wants or something like that. But in reality, no amount of punishment is going to produce successful toilet training, especially if it is due to some genetic component, which seems to be the case. So let's watch a video on infant reflexes.
Reflexes like the palmar grasp, stepping, Moro, and Babinski are an inborn automatic response, nature's toolkit to help an infant adapt to the world. Many reflexes, breathing, swallowing, and sucking, for example, have survival value. Other more primitive reflexes like the Moro and grasping are considered leftovers from our evolutionary heritage. Survival reflexes usually become voluntary at some point during the first year, while the primitive reflexes disappear.
Anthony, go back down for a second. So pretty much losing that. So she withdraws, and the toe goes up and fans out, just like that.
Some reflexes are predominantly related to the nourishment of the infant. Here, in response to stroking at the corner of Aiden's mouth, we see the rooting reflex. 1-week-old Aiden turns his head and opens his mouth. He roots in the direction of the stroking. This helps the infant find the breast or bottle and begin feeding. Sucking is another reflex that helps the infant find food. Aiden will instinctively suck on any object that is placed in his mouth, including the doctor's finger.
Some reflexes are predominantly related to the protection of the infant. Stroking the palm of Mackenzie's hand will cause her to close her hands and fingers in a grasp. The grasping reflex may be so strong that the baby can support her own weight.
The Moro or startle reflex is seen when support for the head and neck is suddenly lost, or in response to a loud noise or sudden movement. Here, 1-week-old Aiden throws his arms out and back in response to the doctor's sudden drop of his hands. The Moro reflex, which should be fully present at birth, begins to disappear at around 5 months of age. Jessipina, who is just 2 months old, has already begun to lose the Moro reflex. Absence of the Moro reflex at birth or reappearance after the normal age of disappearance, approximately 5 months, may suggest damage to the central nervous system.
So she doesn't have a startle anymore. It's gone.
Okay.
She's matured and she's overriding that.
Some reflexes, such as the stepping reflex, are related to postural control. When held upright with her feet just touching a flat surface, 2.5-week-old Olivia appears to take steps and walk. This reflex, which typically disappears at around 2 to 3 months of age, will not be seen again until Olivia learns to walk on her own.
Oh, I'm sorry. All right. Let's do that a little better. Let me hold you this way so people can see you. Okay. So she stands, and there like that. She'll start taking some steps. And you can get it to, if you sort of touch the top of her foot, she'll pick up a little bit there, like that.
Reflexes are also used to identify normal brain activity. Absence, persistence beyond the normal time for disappearance, or the reappearance of a reflex later in life is suggestive of significant neurological problems. For example, the Babinski reflex, exhibited here by Olivia when the bottom of her foot is stroked, causes the big toe to flex towards the top of the foot and the other toes to fan out. The Babinski is normal in children under 2 years of age. After 2 years of age, the presence of the Babinski indicates damage to the nerve paths connecting the spinal cord and the brain.
So one of the ways that babies learn is through imitation. We know that newborns can discriminate between facial expressions and even will imitate them. So they can tell if an adult's happy or sad or surprised, and they will replicate the faces that their caregivers are giving them. So here's a video of a newborn imitating its father.
Xavier, hello, hello.
Only 10 minutes old, Xavier's infant senses are bombarded with new sights, sounds, and feelings.
Good boy.
He watches his father pull faces and then slowly responds. This isn't conscious mimicry. Xavier doesn't even know he has a face. But he's managing to translate what he sees into similar actions of his own.
Hello. He copied Daddy.
So most people can't really remember anything before the age of 3. Unless maybe they had a profound or traumatic experience when they were under the age of 3, then maybe they can remember. But generally they can't, and this is referred to as infantile amnesia. Some psychologists argue that we can't remember anything before the age of 4 or 5, and some people say it's younger, before the age of 2. But we certainly know that there's a period in our infant years that we just can't remember. And it could be in part due to the brain and its development and not having a fully matured hippocampus when we are in our infant years. So we know a couple things about neonates' perception. We know that their perceptual development happens really fast. One of the things we know is that they prefer patterns with edges over less distinct and ambiguous patterns. We know that they're able to recognize their own mom's voice at 3 days. They can tell the difference between their native and foreign languages at just 2 days. And we know that they prefer liquids that have been sweetened because, and actually, naturally, a mother's breast milk is pretty sweet. So they seem to have a preference for that sweet flavor. So let's go ahead and watch a video now of babies being able to tell the difference between all of the different phonemes across the languages, which indicates that we're set up to hear all the different sounds in all the different languages, but eventually just kind of habituate to our own.
Infants are born with the flexibility to learn any language. The obscure Indian dialect spoken here is helping psychologist Janet Worker discover when babies lose that potential, when in fact they begin to master a single language.
The Thompson or Inflecapm language is useful to me because it has a set of consonants that are not used in English and that English speakers cannot discriminate between.
Worker records these consonant sounds to pinpoint the critical period of development, the point when babies exposed to English can no longer discriminate among Indian sounds.
So first off, what I would like you to do is help me think of some words that are used in the Thompson language that differ in only a single sound.
Like Graham and Graham.
Oh boy, those sound the same to me. Now, can you say those again?
Graham, that's frying.
Okay.
And Graham, to secure. Maybe you secure your pack or whatever.
Okay, can you say this word, this one I've written down here, which means to fry, and then pronounce the first consonant and vowel 3 times, very slowly.
Graham. And then the other word is Graham. That's to secure. Graham.
We teach the baby to turn her head when the sound changes. In testing, we can then tell if the baby can hear the sound change because she turns her head in anticipation of the toys coming on. The toys then serve as a reward for a correct head turn.
This 8-month-old baby has no trouble anticipating the appearance of the toys. She turns when she hears the sound change. This baby is a year old. For him, the difference in sounds no longer exists. He only turns after the toys have appeared.
There's a reorganization in speech perception across the first year of life so that the young infant is born ready to learn any human language. And experience then functions to narrow that universal set of abilities, that universal discriminatory ability to be specific to the particular language that the baby is learning.
Exposure to the environment commits some neurons to forming useful networks. We become better at one language as we lose the ability to perceive others.
So there are lots of different ways that we can test a baby's perception. We use EEG machines, which monitor their brainwaves. We also are able to measure their attention to something by how quickly they suck on a nipple, which is attached to a computer. So if their heart rate goes up when they see something new, it generally means that they're interested in it, and then if their heart rate goes down, it usually means that they've habituated to it or gotten used to it. And then, like I said, there are changes in the vigor and rate of their sucking, which indicates a change in their perception of whatever it is that they're looking at as well. So let's go ahead and watch a quick video on how we measure babies' perception in psychology.
Psychologists used to believe that the baby human's mind was one great, blooming, buzzing confusion. But the baby human comes into the world already equipped with the capacity to think, reason, to learn about the world and about itself. At the moment, 2-week-old Heather lives only in the immediate world of the senses. Like all newborns, she responds to a series of stimuli, but they have no meaning for her. A play of light and dark from the window captures her interest. Her eyesight is not developed yet, so this is what she sees. The patches on the wall seem to come alive and beckon her. At this this young age, Heather has already embarked on the huge task of making sense of her surroundings. Now her eyes turn to the bars of her crib. They look like thick stripes, just the right size for her eyes to discern. But what the baby human responds to most of all is the human face.
Hello. Good morning.
Heather is gazing at the most important face she's encountered so far. At 12 inches, what she sees are mainly contrasts of light and dark where the features are. But her clearest view is from 6 inches away, an easy distance to communicate love between mother and child. It seems nature has prepared the baby human from birth to pay attention to the face, as if saying, look carefully. Something that looks like this is going to be very important for your survival.
Hi there. Okay, are you all set?
At Daphne Morer's lab, Terry Lewis is part of a group studying the phenomenon of this attraction and how it develops in the first 3 months of life.
Are you ready?
10-day-old Dylan is shown a card with 2 images on it. The right side has 3 blobs representing the rudimentary configuration of the human face. The left has the blobs inverted.
Good looking. Very good.
Dylan is drawn to the image that resembles the human face. But what is it that he's attracted to?
Be careful, I might trick you.
To find out, they show Dylan another card.
Okay, are you all set?
One side has the blurry image of a face, and the other side was created to represent only the light and dark contrasts of a face. Dylan prefers to look at the side with the contrasts of a face, which indicates that it's not the features themselves that the baby human reads at this age, but the areas of contrast created by those features.
Hello.
So what 2-week-old Heather is really fascinated with is the contrast between light and shadow created by her mother's eyes, mouth, and hairline. But she doesn't know yet what they mean. Back at the lab, 6-week-old Devon is shown the same card.
How about these guys now?
Unlike Dylan, he turns to the image that looks more like a face. The other image no longer interests him. So what happened in those 4 short weeks that separate Heather and Devon? Researchers believe that this is when the baby human's higher brain centers, which are sensitive to visual stimuli, take over. And that is what's directing Devon's gaze and begins to give meaning to what he sees. At the same time, other regions of the higher brain centers are preparing the baby human to think and reason. These exceptional capacities are what set humans apart from the rest of the animal kingdom. Gavin is 8 weeks. As he begins to interact with his environment, the world around him takes on new meaning. He looks at his mother with new eyes. During these critical early weeks, new neural pathways in the brain are forged. The more things the baby human sees, the more this ability surges. At 2 months of age, this is what Gavin's world looks like to him. His life thus far has been a kaleidoscope of sights, sounds, sensations, and smells. But he's now beginning to make connections between them.
Let's get this all changed for you. There we go.
He suddenly realizes a remarkable thing.
He's a happy boy then.
That the sound of the voice and the moving lips of his mother are related.
Good boy.
For the first time, he can put together sight and sound. Out of the chaotic flow of impressions, he slowly realizes that the world isn't one thing. He now begins to distinguish the amazing world of objects.
So as babies' perceptual abilities develop, so do their social behavior. And early social development really lays the foundation for their future relationships. So one of the things that we look at in psychology is attachment between a child and their caregivers. And so attachment is defined as the positive emotional bond that develops between a child and a specific individual. And early studies of attachment were conducted by the man you see on the screen here named Konrad Lorenz. So he tested his theory that baby ducklings would follow the first moving stimulus that they saw. And so he actually was there when they hatched, and he was the first thing that these baby ducklings saw, and they imprinted on him and then would follow him around his lab and wherever he went. And therefore they were attached to him, which really birthed the study of attachment. And another famous study of attachment had to do with monkeys. So there's a researcher by the name of Harlow, and Harlow gave monkeys two choices. So there were two wire monkeys, fake monkeys, that were in the lab, and then the actual monkeys would choose between the two wire monkeys. And one wire monkey had milk, and another wire monkey had a soft, warm cloth. And actually the monkeys spent most of the time with the softer monkey, indicating that they liked that affection and felt attached to the softer, more comforting monkey. So let's watch a brief video on Harlow's monkeys.
Let me show you a monkey raised on a nursing wire mother. Now here are 106's two mothers. As you can see, it was weaned on a wire mother. Here's baby 106. Watch.
He's going to the wire mother.
He's got to eat to live.
Oh, he's going back.
He's back on the cloth mother, and he'll stay on the cloth mother. Actually, this baby spends from 17 to 18 hours a day on the cloth mother and less than 1 hour a day on the wire mother. We had predicted that the variable of contact comfort would be a variable of measurable importance, but we were unprepared to find that it completely overwhelmed and overshadowed all other variables, including those of nursing.
Frankly, Doctor, if it comes to a choice between wire and cloth, it's reasonable to expect that any child will go to the cloth. It's a matter of creature comfort, like a baby with its blanket. But is this really love?
Well, what do you mean by saying that a baby loves its mother? Certainly one thing we mean is that it gets a great feeling of security in the presence of the mother. Now, Mr. Collingwood, wouldn't you say that if you frightened a baby, that it went running to its mother, was comforted, and then all the fear disappeared and was replaced by a complete sense of security, that that baby loved its mother? Now, in this experiment, this is the apparatus we use.
That looks diabolical.
That's just the way the baby monkey feels about it. Flashing eyes, loud sound, moving mechanical parts, all of these things are designed to frighten a monkey. Now here we have a peaceful, resting baby monkey. Let's find out what his reactions to his mother are when we frighten him.
He's scared, all right.
And he does what any child will do in a similar situation.
He runs away.
It's more than running away. He was running to his mother, to touch her, to drive away his fear. Contact with the mother changes his entire personality. Look, now he's actually threatening the diabolical object. All right. This gives us part of the picture of the strength of infantile love. This is a 6-foot square room with a few toys and other objects. But to the monkey, it's much more menacing. We know that when our own children are taken to a strange place without their mothers, they are often overwhelmed with fear. This room is just such a new and strange environment for the baby monkeys. No mother is in there. Now, let's put a monkey into the room. Notice how cautiously he enters the room. He's searching for comfort, but nothing relieves his disturbance. Now we'll take the baby monkey out and put in a wire mother.
Now this one was nursed by a wire mother.
That's right, all his life.
She doesn't seem to help much.
Now, we'll try the same test with a cloth mother in the room. You see the contrast in the behavior? Despite the fact that the wire mother nursed him, she could offer this infant nothing in the way of affection or security. But here the monkey, by rubbing against the cloth mother, as if he were seeking as much contact comfort as he could get, builds up his reservoir of affection and security. First, his body relaxes as the fear disappears. But above and beyond this, new positive response patterns appear. He now goes out to explore and investigate this new, strange world. He is now a normal, happy, curious baby.
Studies now show that attachment really grows through the responsiveness of the caregiver to the baby in what's called reciprocal interaction. So the way the baby treats the mom affects the way the mom treats the baby, which affects the way the baby treats the mom, and this cycle is created. So a woman by the name of Mary Ainsworth, who studied under a man named John Bowlby, created an experiment known as the strange situation, which measures attachment. And so basically the child is placed in a strange situation in a room with a bunch of toys, and the mom is in there, and then a stranger comes into the room, and the mom leaves, and the baby's alone with the stranger, and then the mom returns. And so Mary Ainsworth was interested in how the baby responds when the stranger comes in, and when the mom leaves, and when the mom comes back. And based on how the baby responds to these different situations, Mary Ainsworth would classify the baby as having one of 4 types of attachment, which are secure attachment, avoidant, ambivalent, and disorganized, disoriented. So let's go ahead and watch the video on the strange situation, and then we'll discuss the 4 attachment styles.
Studying attachment is not straightforward. One way is to observe the children in the home setting relating to mother, father, or other children. But can the essential elements of home life be translated into a standard laboratory setting for controlled scientific study? After conducting extensive observations of parents and children at home, a student of Bowlby's, Mary Ainsworth, devised such a procedure, called the strange situation, which places the child under some stress. It has become the most widely used standardized way to assess the quality of a child's attachment to their caregiver. Here the researchers are recording how 14-month-old Lisa responds in this attractive but unfamiliar setting. How will she react to a stranger? What will happen when her mother leaves the room? and when she returns. It's Lisa's behavior when her mother returns, what psychologists call the reunion, that they are particularly interested in.
Most importantly is to look for the type of balance that a child strikes between an attachment need and, on the other hand, to explore the play material.
Once Lisa has settled down to play, a stranger enters the room and sits in the chair reading a magazine.
Lisa, where's the bow? Where's the bow?
After a couple of minutes, the stranger attempts to interact with Lisa. Soon after, Lisbeth gets a cue to leave the room. The stranger tries to comfort Lisa, but in vain. Lisbeth comes back into the room and the camera records how Lisa reacts. Now the first part of the procedure is over, and Lisbeth settles Lisa down again. The stranger leaves them alone together. And soon after, Lisbeth goes too. Lisa is on her own. Her distress is plain to see. Once again, the efforts of the stranger to console Lisa are to no avail. But Lisbeth manages to calm her almost at once, and shortly afterwards the observation ends. Lisa showed outward signs of what's called secure attachment. Can these signs give us an idea of what's going on inside the child's mind? John Bowlby used the idea of an internal working model to describe this. Howard Steele, another attachment researcher, explains what this means.
Some people express the internal working model in the following terms, that the child who behaves securely, if you like, in the strain situation, has a model of the parent as available and loving, and a complementary model of the self as worthy of that love.
When data from a number of strange situations are coded and analysed, secure attachments are usually found in about 60% of the cases.
Seemed to be quite nice.
Another child, 1-year-old Eva, clearly behaves differently from Lisa during the first part of the procedure, after she's been left alone for a short time.
She's first glancing at the mother, and then glancing again at the mother. You would expect now that she would seek proximity, a little bit distracted by the stranger. This takes a long time before she's oriented the mother again, isn't it?
Although she looks, but only shortly.
She's clearly distressed, so you would think that she would seek proximity, but she's just...
She remains playing with the ball.
Yeah. So more or less focused on play material, not letting her emotions go and seek proximity to the mother, get a reassurance.
Coding and classifying behaviour in the strange situation is not always straightforward. Eva behaved differently in the second reunion to how she'd done in the first.
So I was stuck with a little bit of...
Some of her reactions show signs of what Ainsworth describes as insecure avoidant attachment.
On the other hand, fuzzy.
How are avoidant attachments represented in the internal working model?
This is a mother who has communicated to his or her child, if you're distressed, try to keep grips on it. Try to have a stiff upper lip. Try to pull yourself together. Try to be independent. Try to learn to deal with it on your own.
Although the strange situation is used extensively in attachment research, some other psychologists who have studied children's relationships have reservations.
I think the problem is making inferences about the relationship from how children behave in the strange situation, because it is exactly that, a strange situation. Because the tricky thing is, what does the situation mean to the child? It means something probably very different for a child who's been in daycare since early in the first year, and the same is true for children from different cultures, for whom this experience may have very different meaning again.
Despite such criticisms, this 20-minute strange situation procedure is still widely used and believed to indicate the relationship between the child and, in this case, the mother. It is considered to highlight important qualities of the attachment and show significant links with other aspects of the child's experience and behavior.
The child's representation of his or her relationship with mother from the first year of life carries over to the child's behavior with peers at 2, 3, 4 years of age, such that children who look securely attached in the strange situation to mother at 1 year are getting on better with peers in the preschool, able to work cooperatively on tasks, resolve dilemmas, conflicts that emerge, often without resorting to the teacher.
So Ainsworth considered a baby securely attached if they employed the mother as kind of a home base, exploring independently but then returning to her occasionally. So they would cry when the mom leaves, and then they would go to her when she came back into the room. And then avoidant children, so avoidant attachment, they didn't cry when the mom left, and then they kind of avoided her when she returned, as if they were indifferent. And then ambivalent attached children displayed anxiety before they were even separated amongst coming into the room. They already were demonstrating anxiety. And then they were upset when the mother leaves, but when she returned, they were kind of showing mixed feelings towards her. They may hug her and then hit her when she came back, kind of try to embrace her and then pull away. And then disorganized, disoriented children, they seem depressed and kind of out of it. These children showed really inconsistent and contradictory behavior. They had almost expressionless looks on their faces. And Ainsworth later realized that those children may have and most likely were the product of abuse. So a secure attachment tends to produce the best outcomes in adults. Adults with a secure attachment tended to have trusting and lasting relationships. They tend to have good self-esteem. They're comfortable sharing feelings with people, and they often seek out social support and friendship and community and things like that. So let's talk about social development in infancy and childhood. One thing that's changed in the recent decade is the father's role in the child's social development. More dads are staying home than ever before. One thing we know that's different between the way fathers interact with the way mothers interact with kids is that fathers tend to play a little rougher than moms, who choose less physical activities like peekaboo and reading and singing. However, the nature of attachment is really similar between moms and dads. And we know that children are capable of bonding with multiple people simultaneously. As far as the social relationships with kids and their peers, by 2 years old, kids tend to be less into their parents, more independent, and want to play with other kids. At first, they'll sit next to kids, but be more into their own toys and own activities. And then later, they want to interact with kids more. As they get older, their play becomes more complex and frequent. They play games with teams. They're more imaginative, more creative in their play. And playing is really important for kids. It teaches them to consider other people's perspectives and interpret the meaning of other people's behavior, which helps them to be more socially competent. So they're able to learn social rules like no hitting, be polite, control your emotional displays of behavior. Many parents seek out child care outside of the home, especially when both sets of parents have to work, or a single mom or a single father has to work. And so there's been several studies of kids who went to quality daycares versus kids who went to maybe less quality daycares. And it shows that quality daycares actually can benefit social development more than kids who stay at home. So kids that went to quality daycares, meaning there was lots of resources, games, interaction, learning, education, these kids were more considerate and sociable with others. They were more compliant and more independent than kids who stayed home. So quality daycare does have the ability to provide more intellectual stimulation sometimes than being at home does, since there are lots of kids there and then those other resources that we discussed earlier. So kids that go to quality daycares show higher IQ scores and better language abilities than kids that stay home. However, kids with too much daycare or low quality daycare can be negatively impacted. They have shown less secure attachment between with their parents and a reduced ability to work independently and then use time effectively in kindergarten. So the parenting style of the caregiver is really critical in shaping the child's social competence. And a psychologist by the name of Baumeister did a study, and he decided that there were 4 types of parents. So the first type is authoritarian parents, and these are parents who are rigid and punitive and value unquestioning obedience from their children. So they're the type of parents that they tell the child to clean the room. The child says, "Why do I have to? I don't want to." And the parent says, "Because I said so." The next type of parenting style is permissive parenting, and these are parents who give their children relaxed or inconsistent direction, and they're warm and affectionate and loving. They just require very little of their children. They often end sentences with "okay" and just have a hard time saying no. And then there are authoritative parents, and these are parents who are firm, set clear limits. They reason with their children, they explain things to them. So if they tell their child to clean the room and the kid says, "I don't want to," the parent says, "Look, you need to because we don't want people to trip on your toys and sprain an ankle. We want to take good care of our belongings so they last a long time." So they're willing to answer questions and explain why the rules are the rules, but they do stick to the rules. And then there are uninvolved parents, and these are parents who show little interest in their children and are emotionally detached. So research shows that children of authoritative parents tend to have the highest self-esteem, self-reliance, and social competence. And children of authoritarian parents seem to be unsociable, unfriendly, and withdrawn. Permissive parents tend to produce children that show immaturity, dependence, moodiness, and low self-control. And then, of course, the uninvolved parents, their children tend to do the worst, feel unloved, are emotionally detached, and also their physical and cognitive development is often impeded. So the development also depends on a kid's temperament, their ability to be resilient, to get over things, and their culture. Let's go ahead and watch a video on parenting styles.
"25 years of research has shown that parents who have a strong and positive connection with their children and use a balanced parenting style have children and teens that are more confident and develop better overall skills to succeed as responsible, caring adults."
The balanced parenting style is also described as authoritative or positive. Parents who use this style explain the importance of rules to their kids and why they must be followed. They also give their teen an opportunity to make choices and explain the consequences of those choices. While independence is encouraged, expectations are also clearly stated. Expectations of behavior are age appropriate and misbehavior is handled accordingly. Parents who use a balanced approach are firm, warm, and loving. Teens of balanced style parents tend to be the most well-adjusted. As parents encourage freedom of expression, the teen develops a sense of independence and competence as an adult. They are influenced by their parents and have a better ability to control their own behavior and make good decisions. They develop thinking and social skills needed to succeed outside of the family. They do better in school, report less anxiety, have higher self-esteem, and are less likely to engage in risky behaviors, including the use of drugs and alcohol.
Authoritarian parents are overly strict and not very sensitive to their child's needs. Since authoritarian parents do not pay attention to their child's point of view, conflict between the parent and teen can increase. Because authoritarian parents allow only a few choices to be made by their teen, the teen does not learn how to make independent decisions. They may listen to their peers' advice rather than thinking for themselves, which may result in riskier behavior. As a result, teens with authoritarian parents learn to rely on authority and look to others to decide what is right. They may have lower self-esteem and lack initiative, spontaneity, and curiosity.
The permissive style parent is accepting and warm, but gives up most control to their teen by not setting limits. These parents have few expectations about behavior and tend to accept their teen's behavior, whether negative or positive. Permissive parents let their teens set their own activities, rules, and schedules. When rules exist, these may change frequently. As a result, the teen becomes confused about their parents' expectations. These parents also tend to be lenient and avoid confrontation. Teens with permissive parents may seem immature, as they often have not learned to control their impulses, and rather than accept responsibility for their actions, they tend to blame others.
Here's an example of a typical teen situation and how you might apply the different parenting styles. The teen might say, "I'm going out with my friends to Melissa's party. Bye." The authoritarian parent would say, "You're not going anywhere. I don't like your friends, and you should be home doing your homework. Your math mark has gone down."
A permissive parent might say, "See you later. I'm going out too. Just lock the door when you leave."
A balanced parent would say, "Hold on. First, let me know where you are going and who you are going to be with. Are their parents going to be home? I'd like to give them a call. Call me if plans change, please. I'd like you home by 11 o'clock. Like, have a good time." In our busy culture, it is too common to be isolated from one another. Find ways to connect with other parents of teens through your faith group, school, sporting events, or work. Compare notes and share ideas in order to support and learn from one another. Check out different information at parenting workshops and credible online sources.
For more information, see our video library on parenting teenagers at healthunit.com. Thanks for watching.
Erik Erikson developed a social theory of development called his psychosocial theory. And this says that individuals' interactions and understanding of each other and their knowledge of themselves as members of society is really what causes their self to emerge. So it focuses on the emergence of the self and the way in which the self develops through our interactions with both our social and cultural environment. So we'll be kind of revisiting this theory as we go through the different ages in development. We'll do the first 4 of them now as they relate to infancy and childhood. So it's important to understand that at each stage there is what Erikson referred to as a crisis, which he defined as a turning point in life, a moment of transition which is characterized by the potential to either go forward or backward in development. And he says that the crisis has to be resolved sufficiently in order for us to deal with the next crisis. In other words, in order for us to move on to the next stage, we have to successfully resolve the crisis of the current stage that we're in. So stage 1 occurs in infancy, which is classified as 0 to 1 years old. And the crisis in this stage is trust versus mistrust. So Erikson says that the infant's basic task or their core struggle is to develop a sense of trust in their self, in others, and the environment. And they're able to establish this sense of trust if they're held, loved, cuddled, fed when they're hungry, clothed when they're cold. But if infants are neglected, then they can develop a sense of mistrust towards human relationships that can last for their entire life. And we might see other kind of resounding issues associated with this mistrust, like low self-esteem, isolation, withdrawal, and an inability to have intimate relationships throughout their lives. Stage 2 occurs in early childhood, which is between the age of 1 and 3 years old. And the crisis here is autonomy versus shame and doubt. So children who fail to establish some control over themselves, particularly through toilet training and through emotions, children who fail to establish control over themselves and cope with the world develop a sense of shame and doubt about their capabilities. So autonomy is really a self-governing state, and it might be displayed as in developing mastery over self-controlled tasks like toilet training and being able to control their outbursts or their temper tantrums. And they might master this self-control and autonomy through exploration and independence. However, if they're not able to control their emotions or toilet train successfully and autonomously, then they can develop a sense of shame and doubt about themselves, and this can cause them to have difficulty accepting and dealing with their emotions and feelings later on in life. So they may, as adults, become demanding and controlling and often live in a state of denial. Stage 3 is when we are preschool children, which is between the ages of 3 and 6 years old. And the crisis here is initiative versus guilt. So we develop roles through play while establishing a sense of competence. And when we do this, we have a sense of initiative. We are able to start things and feel confident in doing that, taking the initiative to solve problems, to express our thoughts, etc. However, unexpected outcomes can come from playing independently, like making a mess, spilling, having an accident, hurting someone's feelings. And these things can lead to guilt. If we are restricted or ridiculed from taking initiative to play, then we can experience a sense of guilt and withdrawal from play. So these first 6 years really shape us and determine how we react during crisis. However, Erickson did state that the effects of early learning can be reversed for the most part. However, if you do develop this sense of guilt, then this can inhibit our emerging individuality and can cause us to be kind of rigid as adults and remorseful of our childhood, and can cause us to withdraw from taking an active stance in life or in conflict or in issues. Erickson says stage 4 occurs during middle childhood when we are between the ages of 6 and 12 years old, and the crisis here is industry versus inferiority. So we set goals and attain goals socially, but especially in school. If not, we tend to feel inferior to our peers. So we want to do well socially, make friends, particularly in this age group. We tend to have same-sex friends. So girls want to play with girls, boys want to play with boys. And we also try to learn basic skills at school, like reading, writing, basic math calculations, and physical skills. And so we start to, in terms of our friendships, accept cultural differences, and we learn to identify the role that we take in a group. Are we more of a leader, more of a follower? And we start to learn empathy. We begin listening to other people, and question asking skills develop. So potential problems if this crisis isn't resolved successfully, if we don't develop a sense of industry and competence, then we might develop a sense of inferiority, which causes us to feel sort of like a failure or like we're inadequate, and often be fearful of new challenges. So we're going to look at the cognitive development in children, and this is the process by which a child's understanding of the world changes as a function of their age and experience. And John Piaget is kind of the leader in the study of cognitive development in children, and his theory seeks to explain intellectual advancements in development. So Piaget states that there are 4 stages in cognitive development, and a person must complete one stage to move on to the next one. The stages themselves differ in the quantity of information acquired and the quality of the information acquired. And a child is able to move from one stage to the next when the kid has matured enough and is exposed to relevant experiences that allow his cognition to expand. The first of Piaget's stages is called the sensory motor stage, which lasts from birth to 2 years old. And this is a time during which a child has little confidence in representing the environment by using images, language, or other symbols. So what they have to do is develop their understanding of the world, mostly in terms of their sensory impressions and motor activities. So, in other words, their basic understanding comes from touching, chewing, shaking, sucking, and manipulating objects. Since they're not really able to conjure up mental images, if you tell a kid to think of a burrito, if they're 2 weeks old, they might not have ever seen a burrito before, and they're not capable of making a mental image. So they have to understand the world through their senses and through movement. 2 developmental phenomena that we see in the sensory motor stage are object permanence and stranger anxiety. So stranger anxiety is exactly how it sounds. It's very common for a person between the ages of 0 and 2 years old to feel nervous about strangers, and when someone new comes into the room, they might cling to their parents. Even if it's like a grandparent or someone they see quite frequently, they still might feel a little uncomfortable with anyone outside of their parents. And then object permanence is the awareness that objects and people continue to exist even if they are out of sight. So in the beginning of the sensory motor stage, children lack object permanence, which is why peekaboo is so fun for kids, because if you hide your face and then reveal your face and then cover your face and show your face, the kid lacks object permanence, so they think that you are really disappearing forever and then reappearing and then disappearing and reappearing, which makes peekaboo a very trippy experience for them. So if you were to hide a toy under a blanket, until about 9 months old, they wouldn't look for that toy because they'd figure that once it's out of their sight, it ceases to exist, it's gone forever. But then after 9 months, they will start to look for that toy, and now we'd say that they have object permanence. So let's go ahead and watch a video on object permanence.
New babies aren't quite sure what happens to objects when they leave their sight. Sky's mom keeps disappearing and reappearing. No wonder peekaboo is so much fun. During their first year, however, infants will learn an important concept: object permanence. Everything has a life of its own, even if it is out of sight.
At Maya's age, babies know to look for the object, but they might not have everything else straight. 10-month-old Simon is about to make a classic mistake, known as the A not B error. Although he watched us place the toy plane under the white cloth, he'll look for it where he last found it, not where he watched us hide it. If a 1-year-old can't find an object they want right away, they're likely to give up looking.
The next of Piaget's stages is the pre-operational stage, and this is from the ages of 2 to 7 years old, and this stage is really defined or characterized by language development. And we do know that now children are able to make mental representations and images, which allows them to develop language because they can look at those images in their mind's eye and describe people, events, and they're able to articulate how they're feeling. So there are 2 main developmental phenomenon in this stage. And the first is pretend play. So pretend play is really important in a child's development. They start to play games or act out things that they've seen in their environment, so they might pretend to sleep or play hide and seek, and all of these things help them to make sense of the world. And the other developmental phenomenon is egocentrism. So egocentrism or egocentric thought is a way of thinking in which a child views the world from entirely his or her own perspective, and they really believe that the rest of us are experiencing the world the way they are, literally through their own eyes. So they might tell stories out of context because they assume that you know and share their perspective. In play, they might hide against a wall and close their eyes because if they can't see you, they think that you can't see them. Another one of my favorite stories of egocentrism is a student told me that their son was talking to their grandma on the phone and was coloring a picture as they were talking and said, "Grandma, do you like my picture?" And the grandma said, "I can't see your picture through the phone." And the child had a really hard time understanding why grandma couldn't see the picture, because he could see the picture, and he assumed because of egocentric thought that everyone could see his picture. So let's go ahead and watch a video on a psychologist testing a child on egocentric thought, and you'll notice that when the child describes what he's looking at, he describes that accurately, and then when he describes what the other person is looking at, he just again describes what he's looking at. And then it shows a older child who has kind of grown out of egocentric thought being able to express what the other person is looking at, which he recognizes is different from his own perspective.
Can you tell me what you see when you look at that from where you're sitting? What are some of the things that you see?
And a cat.
A cat.
And a tree and a bone.
Okay, now we're going to do the same thing. Can you tell me what you see when you look at it from that stool?
An owl.
An owl?
And him.
What is that?
A goat.
A goat?
Yeah.
Okay, is there anything else you see?
Yeah, right there.
Right there, what is that?
A tree.
A tree.
And that's another little tree.
Another little tree?
Yeah, right.
Okay. And can you tell me what I see when I look at this from where I'm sitting right here?
An owl.
Okay.
And a goat.
Mm-hmm.
And a little tree. And that. And that.
Okay, so can you tell me what you see from that side?
A fox and a bone and a volcano and a rock and a big fat Christmas tree.
Now, Braxton, can you tell me what I see from where I'm sitting?
A bird and a river and a volcano and a horsey and a rock and a plant.
The next of Piaget's stages is the concrete operational stage, and this occurs between the ages of 7 and 12 years old. And this stage is characterized by logical thought and a loss of egocentrism. So during the concrete operational stage, we're able to think logically about concrete events, so things that we can see, smell, taste, things that have actually happened. We're able to grasp concrete analogies and perform math operations like addition and subtraction. And so two of the developmental phenomenon in this stage are conservation and reversibility. So conservation is the knowledge that the quantity of something is unrelated to the physical appearance of the objects, or just because you change the size or shape of something doesn't mean that the amount has to change. For example, there was a man who called a pizza place and ordered a 14-inch pizza, and the person on the phone said, "Would you like that cut into 8 slices or 6 slices?" And the man on the phone said 6 slices because I could never eat 8. So this man would have what we say a lack of conservation, not understanding that just because you change the shape of the slices doesn't affect the overall quantity of the pizza. So now we're going to take a look at this video on conservation.
Can you look at these two glasses? Do you think that they have the same amount of juice? You think they have the same? Okay. Now we're going to pour this juice into this glass. Now, do you think that this glass has more juice, this glass has more juice, or do you think that they have the same amount?
That one has more.
This one has more, and why do you think that this one has more?
Because it's taller.
Okay, you ready? Yeah. Okay. Does this row have more quarters? Does this row have more quarters, or do they have the same?
1, 2, 3. Wait. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. They're both the same.
They're the same?
5, 5.
Okay. Okay. Does this row have more quarters? Does this row have more, or do they have the same?
This one has more.
That one has more quarters?
Yeah.
Why does this row have more quarters?
Because it's more far away.
It's more far away?
Yeah, it's more far away than that. Looks bigger.
All right, we're going to play a game with the graham crackers, and we're going to share them between me and you, okay? Okay. Do you think that we shared those fairly?
No.
No, why not?
You have those and I have this one.
Well, what if we try this? Okay, can I put this down right there?
Okay.
Now is it fair?
Yeah.
Yeah, why is it fair now?
Because we both have two.
The next developmental phenomenon in concrete operational stage is reversibility, which is the idea that some changes can be undone by reversing earlier actions. So this helps kids to understand math problems like addition and subtraction and varying the numbers in different ways to get the same summation, for example. But it also helps them in a variety of different problem-solving ways. However, kids in this stage are still sort of bound to concrete physical realities of the world, and so they have difficulty understanding questions of an abstract nature. The formal operational stage, which is from 12 years old and up, is when we are able to start considering abstract thought. And we're able to think imaginatively and think in metaphors and think in analogies. And so in this formal operational stage, one of the things that Piaget would do to test children was he would give them a pendulum problem. And he would ask what determines how fast a pendulum swings. Is it the length of the string, the weight of the pendulum, or the force of the push on the pendulum? And children in the previous stage, the concrete stage, would have no rational plan to solve this. They'd manipulate the string, the weight of the pendulum, and the force all at once. But kids in the formal operational stage, they would examine one variable at a time, eliminating options that didn't work, kind of like a scientist. And Piaget says that only 40 to 60% of adults ever reach this stage. Okay, go ahead and pause the video here, head on over to Moodle, and complete the first lecture activity. Okay, so the next age range in life is adolescence, or our teen years. And this is the developmental stage between childhood and adulthood. And common concerns of adolescents are about their friends, parents, appearance, independence, and their futures. It's really a time of turmoil and profound changes, physically, cognitively, and socially, because we're no longer children, but we're not yet quite adults, and our body is going through a myriad of changes, and the way we're treated socially is also kind of changing. So let's look at the physical development in adolescence. So, some major physical development issues take place during adolescence. And so the major one is puberty, and this is when a adolescent begins to mature sexually. And so this involves a surge of hormones, and during puberty, which can happen for boys between the ages of 13 and 14, and on average with girls 11 and 12. Of course, these are averages, so it can be different depending on the child. But during puberty, the growth of the primary sex characteristics develop dramatically, and the primary sex characteristics are the reproductive organs and external genitalia. So the body structures, the ovaries, the testes, which make sexual reproduction possible. And then secondary sex characteristics also begin to develop, and these are non-reproductive sexual characteristics such as female breasts and hips, deepening of the voice for males, and body hair. And the first menstrual cycle for a woman or for a girl is menarche, menarche. And the first ejaculation in boys is called spermarche, which is usually around the age of 14 and happens at night in what's called nocturnal emission. And then in addition to all these hormonal changes that go on, there's also a lot of change that's happening in the brain, particularly in the frontal lobe. So the frontal lobe is not fully developed until we are 25, and it actually kind of goes under construction again once we hit our teen years. So about the same time we're in puberty, our frontal lobe starts kind of working on itself again and is under construction, which makes it really not function properly. In particular, the axons are growing a lot of myelin, which is that fatty tissue that speeds up neurotransmission and enables better communication with other brain regions. However, because this is developing, it eventually will bring improved judgment, impulse control, and the ability to plan for the long term. However, while it's under construction or while it's maturing, it causes a lag in the emotional limbic system, and it's going to create some emotional issues, impulsiveness, risky behaviors. So all of that can really be attributed to both the frontal lobe being under construction and the hormones associated with puberty. We know that sexual attraction begins around 10, even before the maturation of the sex organs. And we are also seeing something where kids are are going into puberty younger than ever before. So this might be due to nutrition and medical care or the hormones in the food. We're not really sure what's causing children to go into puberty earlier than ever before. We just know that it's happening. And so there's some interesting dichotomies between an early maturing female and an early maturing male, which is a bit of a double standard. So boys that mature early are generally looked upon by their peers as cooler, physically capable, manly, and they pick on later maturing boys. Whereas girls that mature early are often mocked, ridiculed, called promiscuous. So this double standard has existed for a while and continues to exist even in this day and age. So children are in that concrete operational stage that Piaget talked about, which makes them see the world in kind of black and white, unvarying terms with no ambiguity, whereas adolescents can reason on a more complex level, and so they're able to understand that morals are not always black and white, that there can be more than one correct moral decision. So just real quickly, morals are defined as the judgment values we place on situations when we determine if what the person did was right or wrong. And so the way we develop our morals is still up in the air. Psychologists don't have a definitive answer. But there is some evidence that morals might be genetically kind of in us. And so to demonstrate that, we're going to watch a quick video on fairness and how monkeys respond to whether or not they're being treated fairly.
But with Sarah Brosnan, we started out with capuchin monkeys. So what we did is we put 2 capuchin monkeys side by side. Again, these animals, they live in a group. They know each other. We take them out of the group, put them in a test chamber. And there's a very simple task that they need to do. And if you give both of them cucumber for the task, the 2 monkeys side by side, they're perfectly willing to do this 25 times in a row. So cucumber, even though it's really only water in my opinion, but cucumber is perfectly fine for them. Now, if you give the partner grapes, the food preferences of my capuchin monkeys correspond exactly with the prices in the supermarket. And so if you give them grapes, it's a far better food, then you create inequity between them. So that's the experiment we did. Recently, we videotaped it with new monkeys who had never done the task, thinking that maybe they would have a stronger reaction, and that turned out to be right. The one on the left is the monkey who gets cucumber. The one on the right is the one who gets grapes. The one who gets cucumber, note that the first piece of cucumber is perfectly fine. The first piece she eats. Then she sees the other one getting grape, and you will see what happens. So she gives a rock to us, that's the task. And we give her a piece of cucumber, and she eats it. The other one needs to give a rock to us. And that's what she does. And she gets a grape. And she eats it. The other one sees that. She gives a rock to us now, gets again cucumber. She tests the rock now against the wall. She needs to give it to us. And she gets cucumber again. So this is basically the Wall Street protest that you see here. Let me tell you, I still have 2 minutes left. Let me tell you a funny story about this.
So a psychologist by the name of Kohlberg found that moral reasoning occurs in 3 levels. And the first level is pre-conventional morality. And this is when issues are considered in terms of rewards and punishment. So something is morally right if a person's rewarded for doing it, and if a person is punished, then what they did is morally wrong. So a person in the pre-conventional morality stage might just think that everyone in jail is a morally corrupt person because they've all done something that they've been punished for. And so this is a very black and white way of thinking about the prison system, because there are people in prison that are innocent of the crimes that they've been convicted of. And then there is conventional morality, and these are when issues are considered in terms of social expectations, social norms, and the laws. So if the law says that something is legal, then it's morally right. And if the law says something is illegal, then it's morally wrong. So a person in the conventional morality stage would say that marijuana is morally wrong because federally it's still illegal. And they also consider things to be right or wrong based on social norms. So if everyone drinks alcohol and that's the social norm, then it must be morally right to drink alcohol. And then post-conventional morality is a level of moral reasoning that Kohlberg says most people don't actually get to. And this is when issues are considered on a broader sense beyond social norms. When people are able to kind of use their own abstract reasoning and judge actions because they have their own basic ethic principles and their own defined set of what's morally right and morally wrong. So, for example, if they are ingesting marijuana as a way to treat the symptoms of their cancer, they might not consider this to be morally incorrect or morally wrong, even though it is federally illegal. So they're kind of transcending conventional morality in that they are more concerned with what is the greater good and looking at the world and morals in terms of not just black and white, but also the gray area. In terms of morality, we know that men view morality in terms of justice and fairness and more black and white and in a kind of a broad way than women do, where women tend to view morality in terms of compassion and are more situationally based in determining if something was right or wrong, so operate a little bit more in the gray area than men do. Okay, go ahead and pause the video here, head on over to Moodle and complete the next lecture activity. Okay, so we're kind of bouncing around here, but now we're going to go back to Erikson's psychosocial theory of development. And we are on stage 5, which occurs in adolescence. And this is from the ages of 12 to 18, according to Erikson. Adolescence, the age range differs depending on what psychologist you talk to, and that's true for all of the ages in this lecture, adulthood, childhood. But at least for Erikson, it's from 12 to 18. And he says the crisis in adolescence is identity versus role confusion. And so adolescents are trying to figure out who they are, where they're going, and how they're going to get there. And failure to find this sense of identity results in role confusion. And so role confusion is not really having stable values, not being self-aware, and if they're able to develop a sense of identity, then they're able to develop life goals and form relationships that help them prepare for adulthood. Erikson actually suggests that we take what he called a psychological moratorium. And a moratorium for adolescents would be a period which society would give permission to the adolescents to experiment with different roles and values so they could sample life before making major commitments. So that might look like taking a year off after high school and traveling the world, or interning or volunteering and trying on different roles to see maybe what you want your career to be like or your spiritual beliefs before you kind of settle in and then make a commitment to one identity. So most teens are searching for a sense of identity and independence, which can lead them to develop some tension with their parents. They may experiment with behaviors that their parents or society doesn't traditionally like. But usually by the age of 15 or 16, those tensions start to stabilize and typically go away by the age of 18. So some of the major sources of conflict have to do with what are called boomerang children, which historically, teens would leave home as early as after puberty and were treated as adults. However, research shows that now teens are staying home up to 8 years after puberty. So adults are kind of, in some cases, acting in a regressed state as adolescents almost. And one of the main characteristics or developmental phenomenon of adolescence is adolescent egocentrism. And this is a state of self-absorption where teenagers only really see from their own perspective, which can lead them to be critical of authority figures, make them unwilling to take criticism, and quick to fault others. And so this egocentrism causes them to be really self-conscious because they think they are the center of everyone's attention, which is often referred to as the imaginary audience, thinking that everyone is kind of judging them and watching them and concerned with them all the time. Another phenomenon in adolescence is what's known as the personal fable, and this is the idea that teens believe that their experiences are unique, exceptional, and shared by no one else, that their story is a special story with a happy ending, and this makes them think that they are invulnerable. And it's not necessarily that that's not true, that they're not going to have a happy ending, or that they're not unique, that they're not special. They could be all of those things. However, it's the extent to which they believe that. And research shows that this might be the cause of some risky behaviors. My husband says that he used to drive down Mount Baldy at night in a car with the lights off. He and his teen friends would do that when they were younger. And this is an example of these personal fables, that he thought he was invincible. He thought that nothing could ever possibly go wrong for his unique and special life. And this is what we see to be true for a lot of teenagers. And this, in part, is due to that immaturity of the brain in the frontal lobe that is not doing a good job of regulating the impulse control and making kids more impulsive and less reflective. So we're going to watch two videos, the first on personal fables and then the next on the imaginary audience.
But I have some news that's not so encouraging, folks. Today's American high school students think quite highly of themselves. A new study finds that young adults today are much more likely to think they will become outstanding parents, spouses, and workers than their counterparts who grew up in the 1970s.
But that overconfidence isn't necessarily a good thing. Stacey Gleason has this report.
The confidence of youth is a given, but psychologist and author Dr. Jean Twenge says today's young people are different from students of the 1970s.
The students then were optimistic, but not tremendously so. About half of them said they thought they would be very good workers in the future, which is the top category of performance. But by 2006, the most recent year that's available, those high school students, 2/3 of them said they expected to be in that top category. You have some kids who they have a realistic view of their abilities, they'll be just fine. Then you have others maybe a little bit overly optimistic. And then you have those folks who are almost downright delusional.
Twenge says it's easy to find examples in popular culture.
My favorite example of this is the initial episode every season of American Idol, where you get the kids who just, it's sad, they just can't sing. They're just awful. And when Simon tells them they can't sing, they're downright shocked because nobody's ever told them the truth about their performance really not being very good. A really good example of empty praise these days is the kids who play on the team and everybody gets a trophy. So it doesn't matter if you win or you lose, everybody gets a trophy and it's the same size.
Good job. The problem is so ubiquitous, Twenge has written a book about it called Generation Me. Today's young adults have grown up with parents, schools, and the media focused on boosting their self-esteem.
It's clear it all began with good intentions. That teachers and parents and the folks who are writing children's TV shows, they had this idea, well, feeling good about yourself, you feel good about yourself, then all these good things will happen to you. And then, but they wasn't based on any research, it was just based on that it sounded good. Learning to learn from your mistakes is such a key part of becoming a teenager and becoming an adult.
When you think health, think IRU.
Oh Lord. Okay, I woke up in the morning and my hair was all over the place because, of course, I forgot to put it in a ponytail before I went to bed. So I wake up and it's like everywhere and I couldn't contain it at all. It was very bad. And I kept looking at people like, are they looking at me? No, they're not looking at me. Yes, they are. They're looking at me. No, that was just me. Because I asked the next day and they were like, no, what was wrong with your hair? I was like, you didn't see it. It was a mess. No one really noticed.
So the frontal lobe being under construction and the surge of hormones in puberty, along with some of these personal fables and imaginary audiences, can lead to the third leading cause of death in adolescence, which is adolescent suicide. So a teen commits suicide every 90 minutes. We know that females attempt suicide more than males. However, males are 5 times more likely to actually be successful in committing suicide than females are. Adolescent suicide is most common amongst Caucasians, and some of the factors that lead to adolescent suicide are depression, perfectionism, social inhibition, prone to extreme anxiety, alcohol and drugs, and excessive family conflicts. So adolescent suicide is a major problem for people of this age range, and so there are definitely certain signs that we can look out for as a community, giving away things, depression, and offer help or contact hotlines to prevent adolescent suicide to the best of our abilities. Okay, and that leads us to the next stage throughout development, which is adulthood. So adulthood encompasses early adulthood, which is like 18 to 40 years old, middle adulthood, which is 40 to 65, give or take, and then late adulthood, which is 65 and up. So we're back to Erikson's psychosocial theory of development. And stage 6 is young adulthood, which is 18 to 40 years old, according to Erikson. And it's important to note that we're only able to enter adulthood once we have mastered the conflict from adolescence, so the identity versus role confusion conflict. And then once we have developed a strong sense of identity, we can start to deal with the crisis of this stage, which is intimacy versus isolation. So intimacy is about having loving relationships where we're sharing our vulnerable emotions, where we're giving of ourselves and growing with another person. However, if we don't seek out intimate relationships, then we can isolate or alienate ourselves from others, which is defined as isolation. Stage 7 is middle adulthood, which is from 40 to 65 years old, and the crisis here is generativity versus stagnation. So generativity means to be productive, and the idea is that as we reach the top of the mountain of life, we begin to realize that we're about to start a downhill journey, and we self-examine, which may cause us to feel a little turmoil or crisis. Some people refer to this period as a midlife crisis, and we might start to think, is this all there is to life? Which can be the catalyst for this desire to generate or to create. We might work on our memoirs, or start a business, or work on a garden, or just start handing down advice to our kids and grandkids so that we leave some type of legacy behind. If we don't feel this sense of generativity, then we experience a form of psychological death, a midlife crisis known as stagnation. And so it's important to avoid stagnation, that we feel productive in all the facets of our life, career, family, leisure, and that we're leaving a footprint in the sand, so to speak. So check out this video on generativity.
Generativity is a form of helping behavior that tries to pass the torch from one generation to the next. So we really recommend, when you do volunteering, when you're helping around the neighborhood, try not to do it alone. So we talk about, bringing other people in on it. That's really key. If you can get a neighbor, if you can recruit someone from down the block, that helps them. You're modeling a behavior. You're involving them in something that's good for others, but also good for them. And it turns out that when you also do things for others that aren't just indirect, signing a check for a charity, but you're doing something for others that really involves you in their lives, it's much more enriching, and you stick with it over the long haul. Actually, it's interesting how many people who contribute to charitable organizations got started, for example, with the Alzheimer's Association or Spina Bifida or whatever it might be, because their parent or their child had that affliction, and they got to know people. They were contributing to a voluntary association. It became very meaningful to them, and then at a certain point, as time passed, they became big contributors externally with, dollars and cents. So involve people in your helping activities. Become a little bit of an entrepreneur, a bit of an organizer. That's really important.
So with age comes changes in our body. And after the age of 25, the body becomes less efficient and more susceptible to disease. So it's said that we are at our physical peak by the age of 25. And then after that, we see a decline in person's sensory abilities and other health-related issues. However, the older we get, the less likely we are to get the common cold or the flu, because we've had lots of time to build up antibodies. However, our immune system tends to weaken, which causes us to be more susceptible to the disease, like pneumonia, cancer, heart disease. So people often experience weight gain as they age, and as I pointed out, our senses start to be less apt or work as well. And so as far as our eyesight goes, one of the things that happens is the pupil of our eye shrinks and the lens becomes less transparent, which reduces the amount of light that actually reaches the retina. So a 65-year-old retina receives about 1/3 as much light as a 20-year-old retina, which is why it's difficult for elderly people to see in the dark. Also, our sense of taste decreases a little bit, as well as our hearing, which could be due to the cilia in our ear kind of falling out over time. And also our muscle strength, reaction time, stamina diminish noticeably. Our sense of smell diminishes. So as we age, our senses tend to decrease in their potency. For women, they go through menopause, which is the period during when menstruation stops and women are no longer fertile. And there is a significant reduction in the female sex hormone estrogen, which causes hot flashes. Studies used to think that menopause was responsible for depression and memory loss. However, now studies don't really support that. It's more likely that people feel upset about aging, and this causes those mental health-related issues. There's some theory that men have a menopause equivalent known as andropause, and we do see some hormonal changes, but not nearly as dramatic as women. And so some scientists and researchers disregard the whole idea of andropause, or as it's known on the streets, menopause. And also men tend to remain fertile well into their late adulthood. Okay, let's watch a brief video on menopause.
The list of symptoms that occur during menopause can be exhaustive, if you know what I mean. Here are a few: hot flashes, night sweats, fatigue, insomnia, vaginal dryness, pain during sex, and reduced sexual desire. You can also suffer from frequent bladder infections, weight gain, dry skin, hair loss, and hair growth in all the wrong places. And if that's not enough, you may experience tender breasts, migraine headaches, memory issues, brain fog, generalized aches and pains, anxiety, and depression. Heck, I'm depressed just thinking about it. Seriously though, if you're dealing with any of these symptoms, it's no joke. Now, some of these symptoms are caused by the hormonal changes of menopause, and others are the result of normal aging. For example, hot flashes, night sweats, and vaginal dryness are definitely associated with hormonal changes. But weight gain, insomnia, memory issues, headaches, anxiety, depression, incontinence, and hair loss are common issues women face as they age and are not necessarily related to menopause. But no matter what is causing your symptoms, hormonal changes or aging or both, don't worry. We will work to address your issues.
So as far as social development in adulthood, in early adulthood, for most people, this is marked by getting married, having kids, starting a career. And in our early adulthood, we often let our careers define and dictate our lives. One of the things that is interesting in early adulthood is many people test drive life together in what's called the trial marriage. And the question is, does a trial marriage, or living together before you're married, minimize divorce risk? And actually what one research found is that in Europe, Canada, and the United States, those who cohabitated before marriage actually had higher rates of divorce and marital dysfunction than those who did not cohabitate. And so the theory for this is that maybe people who live together before marriage don't value marriage as much, and this could be why they're more willing to get a divorce or more likely to get a divorce than people that wait until they're married to live together. It's just one theory. And then another thing that we experience in adulthood is some people experience a midlife crisis, although a lot of research shows that there's not really a lot of evidence that distress peaks in the midlife age range. However, about 1 in 4 adults do report experiencing some life crisis. And generally, the trigger to the midlife crisis is a major event, like a death or divorce or a job loss or a severe illness, and not just aging. So the theory is that of the midlife crisis is that we hit our 40s and we realize death is inevitable, so we start assessing our lives. Our kids move out, we look old, we realize that our childhood dreams aren't coming true, we start questioning decisions, and then many people avoid this by trying to live in the present and accept circumstances, whereas a few people try to avoid this, cope with this by just avoiding it. So acting younger, regressing, and that's when you get the stereotypical man who divorces his wife for a younger woman and a red sports car. But like I said, there's not a lot of evidence that supports this is what the way things are for most people. And generally, if a midlife crisis does happen, it's not triggered by age. And then also we see marriage, children, and divorce. There's a 50% divorce rate. And so the divorce rate actually just increases the more marriages you have. So another common phenomenon in adulthood is empty nest syndrome. And empty nest syndrome is when a parent, when their child goes off to college or leaves the so-called nest, leaves the home, and then the parent feels somewhat depressed or like, what am I supposed to do with my life now? I've been a parent for the last 18 or 20 years, and now this person's gone, and it's just me alone. And at first, this can kind of create an emotional divorce between a married couple, and that they have to kind of remember what it's like to just be alone with one another. But then often, a few months later, we see a complete turnaround in what's called the post-launch honeymoon, where the parents feel this renewed sense of passion for one another. They realize that they have all this free time now. They might have more money than they had when their child was living with them. And so their happiness kind of peaks shortly after the empty nest syndrome generally. So some common activities for elderly people or people in their late adulthood include napping, eating, walking, and conversing. And what's interesting is these are the exact same common leisure activities for college students. So being in your late adulthood can be a very rewarding and fun period of life. There are some theories of aging we're going to take a look at. So the first is called the genetic pre-programming theory of aging, which says that human cells have a built-in time limit to their reproduction. And after a certain time, they are no longer able to divide. The cells are no longer able to divide or become harmful to the body. So it's like a self-destruct button has been pushed. And then there are wear and tear theories of aging, which suggests that the mechanical functions of the body simply stop working efficiently as people age, in the same way that a car sort of wears and tears as it gets older.
While many search for the proverbial fountain of youth, you might be wondering, why do we age in the first place? What is it about our bodies or cells biologically that causes us to grow old? There's a variety of internal and external factors such as diet, exercise, or environmental stress which all contribute to cell damage and repair and affect the rate of aging. But the surprising truth is that, apart from these, we actually have a biological clock buried within our genetic makeup, and this clock can only run for so long. In other words, we're programmed to die. Your body is made up of trillions of cells which are constantly going through cell division, and every time they divide, they make a copy of their DNA as well. This DNA is tightly packed into structures called chromosomes, of which humans have 23 pairs. The problem is, DNA replication isn't quite perfect and skips over the end of each chromosome. To protect against important DNA information being cut out, we have something called telomeres on the end of chromosomes, which are essentially meaningless repeats of DNA that we can afford to lose. But every time our cells divide, these telomeres become shorter and shorter until eventually they've been entirely stripped away, at which point the cell no longer divides. Some flatworms are able to endlessly regenerate their telomeres, making them effectively biologically immortal. But their lifespans do vary, and they're still susceptible to disease, further suggesting that aging is a mix of genetic and environmental factors. But why don't our cells do this? Ultimately, this replication limit actually helps to prevent cancer, which is the uncontrollable growth of cells and evasion of cell death. The point at which a cell stops replicating is known as cellular senescence. In humans, this replication limit is around 50 times. Once it's reached, the cell gradually begins to lose its function and die, causing age-related characteristics. This also helps to explain why life expectancy is a strongly heritable trait from your parents, because you got your initial telomere length from them. Got a burning question you want answered? Ask it in the comments or on Facebook and Twitter, and subscribe for more weekly science videos.
So studies show that as we get into our late adulthood, we don't necessarily lose intelligence or become confused or forgetful. It could be that IQ tests often require physical components like arrange these blocks, and maybe people in their late adulthood are having poorer performance due to just slower reaction times and not their actual cognitive abilities. So when we compare healthy elderly people to healthy young people, there's much less of a difference in IQ than just looking at a general random sample. One thing we do see is that there's a difference between fluid and crystallized intelligence as we age. So fluid intelligence is, it involves our memory, being able to make calculations like in math and problem solving. And this actually does show a decline with age. Whereas crystallized intelligence, which has to do more with wisdom, information, language abilities, skills, and strategies that you learned through experience, tend to remain steady or improve with age. As far as social development in late adulthood, there's actually a common misconception that elderly people are lonely. But most report that they are functioning members of society. They do face significant challenges, however, retirement, death of a spouse, possibly financial hardships. And so there's different theories revolving the social life of people in their late adulthood. The first is the disengagement theory of aging, which says that aging produces a gradual withdrawal from the world on physical, psychological, and social levels, and disengagement provides an opportunity to reflect and detach from relationships as one prepares for death. And sort of its exact opposite is the activity theory of aging, which says elderly who are most successful while aging are those who maintain the interest in activities that they had during middle age. So it's just the continuation of activities that you did in earlier life. So these are kind of two different ways that people can go about aging, disengaging or staying active. And then there's also what's known as the life review. And the life review is the process by which people examine and evaluate their life. So they kind of look back over their whole life and have, hopefully, a period of acceptance, greater wisdom and serenity, no regrets, and looking back and kind of being grateful for all the experiences that they had. So let's watch a video now on late adulthood.
It's not nice coming back. Just somebody comes and disturbs me.
But heaven will have to wait at least for today, when there's a big birthday party to attend.
She's an inspiration. She's one that shows you that no matter what your age is, you shouldn't stop doing things. You shouldn't stop being active. She's up helping with the baking group, baking things with the other residents. She comes to church every week. She's knitting. She's doing exercises. She can bring her knees up to her forehead. At 105, not many people can do that.
It's that kind of inspiration that draws a crowd. Among them, community leaders and even local celebrities.
There you go, look over there.
Hockey legend Paul Henderson made a surprise appearance for Jordan, a lifelong hockey fan, though she couldn't quite place him.
Do you remember a hockey player by the name of Paul Henderson?
No, but I have my favorite one is...
Henderson didn't take it personally. He was just happy to play a part of celebrating her life.
You know, we're so fortunate to live in this country. And I can't think of anybody that's been more blessed than me. And so I've got a wonderful wife that really encourages to, what can we give back? What can we, how can we encourage somebody else? And so when you're invited to a 105th birthday party, you shut everything else down and you show up just to be a part of a day. So very, very fortunate guy.
At the end of the day, those celebrating Jordan the most are the ones who know her best. Her 3 daughters and son.
She always had great faith. She had taught us a lot about health, fitness, and she loved us most of all.
She's held the whole family together, and that's very important.
Taught us to be fearless, and in a day and age when people are so constantly gripped with fear, she taught us to be very fearless. One reason for her preservation, you mentioned that earlier, I would say because she takes charge of her own life. Like, she doesn't lead it to anybody even here. She would always say, I will ask you to help me when I need your help, and I'm still waiting.
At 105, there are still a lot of things she's able to do, like cut her own birthday cake. For Jordan, it's not the sweetest part of this day.
To know that so many people care for me. Sometimes you feel very lonely and not worth anything, you might just as well be gone, but they all wish me a happy birthday. So that makes me happy.
Although she can't remember some things, there are other things that have stayed with her all her life. A Psalm of Life by Longfellow is one of her favorite poems, one that's especially poignant as she nears the horizon.
Tell me not in mournful numbers, life is but an empty dream, for the soul is dead that slumbers, and things are not what they might seem. Life is real, life is earnest, and the grave is not the goal. Dust thou art, to dust returnest, was not spoken of the soul. Footprints that perhaps another, sailing o'er life's solemn main, a forlorn and shipwrecked brother, seeing, shall take heart again. Let us then be up and doing, with a heart for any fate, still achieving, still pursuing, learn to labor and to wait. And the waiting is so difficult.
Happy birthday, Jessie Jordan. In Toronto, Denise Lottie, 100 Huntley Street.
So the last stage of Erik Erikson's psychosocial theory is stage 8, which is maturity, and this is 65 years until death. The major crisis here is integrity versus despair. And so if you achieve ego integrity, then you accept your own life during your life review, you have no regrets, and you understand that death is natural. It means feeling that you have been productive, accepting what you can't change, not regretting, and taking accountability for where your life is. However, if you don't achieve this ego integrity, then Erikson says that you die in a state of despair, where you are unhappy and unfulfilled, wishing that you had another chance at life. Okay, go ahead and pause the video here, complete lecture activity 3, and then return to this point in the lecture. Okay, and the last thing that we are going to talk about is death and dying. And so there was a woman by the name of Elizabeth Kubler-Ross who in 1969 conducted several interviews with people that were in the later stages of chronic illness. And so she developed a theory where there are 5 stages that people go through as they're dying. And this theory has since been used in a variety of applications. You might go through these 5 stages when you have an intense breakup, or you lose a loved one, or you lose a job. But her original theory was related to people that were in the process of dying. And she said they go through 5 stages, not necessarily in the exact order. It's possible to skip stages and not in the same way, but she saw these stages time and time again. So the first stage is denial, and in this stage, people are real resistant to the idea that they're dying. They don't believe that they have a chronic illness when they're told that. The next stage is anger, which comes after you move past the denial stage, and you might be angry at the doctor who told you were sick, or people around you who are in good health, or you might be angry at God if you believe in God. And then the next stage is bargaining, and they may decide to make deals with God or a higher power by saying that, you know, if you let me live, I promise to go to church every Sunday. The next stage is depression, which is when people realize that bargaining isn't working, and they realize that their lives really are coming to an end. And this is kind of what Kubler-Ross called preparatory grief for their own impending death. And then the last stage is acceptance, and in this stage, people accept that they are going to die. Usually they are unemotional about it and maybe quiet. It's as if they have made peace with themselves and are expecting their death and not holding a lot of bitterness towards their impending death. Okay, we will close with a funny video about Kubler-Ross's 5 stages. So once this video is complete, we are all done with this lecture, and I will see you on the next one. Have a great day.
Uh-oh. It's no big deal. It's probably not even quicksand. I'm gonna have a good laugh about this tonight with the guys. Well, this is just perfect. Stupid quicksand. Stupid jungle. I want to bite someone in the face. Mother. Ah! That stupid jungle. Are you there, God? It's me, Giraffe. Listen, if you would just give me a mulligan on this quicksand thing, I promise. No more peeing on your shorter creatures. What, you get a deal? You know something? I'm cool with this. I bet heaven has all the tender leaves I can eat, and everyone gets their own Slurpee machine. Yeah, take me, sweet death. I await your loving embrace. What? I think I hit the bottom.